Snows of Virginia this year.
Uh-huh. Okay. Good. Surviving. This is good to survive those snows. I am so glad I don't live in the north anymore. Yay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Dr. Greer, and welcome to everyone who is joining us today for this interview. Dr. Greer, thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing this to let the public know about some upcoming events and also about some exciting breaking news.
Yeah, it is. Well, everybody needs to, if they can, join us the April 8th, 9th, and 10th in Scottsdale. We're going to be on a Native American land for a 3-day weekend. And there's a link, should be underneath here. But you can go to SiriusDisclosure.com and see that. The reason this is so important, I've been wanting to do this since Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind came out and the CE5 Contact app came out, to create a sense of community where CE5 people on teams all over the world could gather for an extended weekend and really network with each other. You do a deeper educational experience, and then every night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, we're going to do the meditation, the CE5 contact protocols. The last night on Sunday, we're actually going to go out on the Native American land at a place that they've put aside for us. And we'll do that night event under the stars. The other two will just be indoors because we can only get that spot for one night. But that'll be very exciting. Now, the good news about it is that it holds a fair number of people, but not everybody. So I just was handed something that said that that nighttime event on Sunday, April 10th, I believe it is about 50 people shy of being filled up. So we can take more people in the conference in the hotel ballroom than we can take outdoors, unfortunately. So if you think you're going to want to come in person to that event on Sunday night, you probably want to register pretty quickly. We just announced this a couple weeks ago, and I think the site we thought would hold more, and we just found out yesterday. We had members of our team who are organizing the conference go there in person and found out it actually will hold 200 people fewer than we thought. Therefore, if you do want to be out that night, because this will be exciting. Now, if you can't come in person, we have a team that will be webinaring it live. So the entire weekend, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and then Sunday night out on the native lands outside Scottsdale, we're going to have it webinared. And so what's great about that is that each night, and including the night out on the stars, if you're in some location where you can't travel or come in, you can be there virtually for the whole weekend. Or if you want, just that Sunday night, you can do either. So that's there's a link at SiriusDisclosure.com for you to go and if you want to register for that. Then the idea behind this is that people want an opportunity not only to experience this live together, but also if you're there in person, you can network with all the other CE5 teams and people from all over the world. And I think what's exciting about that, Pat and Justice, are some team members in Texas and some other folks on Saturday morning and on Sunday morning are going to be doing workshops on forming teams, how people organize them, sort of the nuts and bolts. And then on Sunday, we're going to do a in-depth in the morning whole presentation on what I call transdimensional photography and videography. What does that mean? So you look at the videos and photos we have, those are highly interactive with consciousness. An interesting part of this is that the most amazing photos and videos we've gotten of actual ET beings in the field with us or nearby have been sort of activated with consciousness, but also the person doing the videography or photography is very good at connecting to those beings and asking permission and inviting them into the frame. Because as we've talked about before, if you're new to this, interstellar civilizations, most of the time when they're in near Earth vicinity or around the Earth are shifted beyond the speed of light in what some would call another dimension. But they can pop in and out of 3D, but sometimes for a fraction of a second. Often the human eye will miss it, but the new digital cameras, if they're at the right setting, it's very technical. And I honestly, I don't do cameras. I mean, I'm not, give me a ventilator or a defibrillator, I'm fine. But the people who do this are going to be there explaining what the settings should be so you can learn the expertise of how these images are being captured by people who actually know what they're doing, which excludes me, by the way. I understand the principles behind it, but I'm not a videographer or photographer by any means. So, and I credit everyone else who gets these photos and videos. I don't do that. I'm busy kind of running the whole program and doing the contact primarily. But that's going to be very important for people to learn as sort of a hands-on workshops on Saturday and Sunday morning. And then the afternoons and evenings, we're going to be going deep into consciousness, the science of consciousness. On Sunday, we're going to have a whole afternoon session on what the counterintelligence operations are from the military and the intelligence community and the things that they can do to confuse people during CE5 contact. And so it's going to be a very in-depth weekend, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, and it's going to be the pièce de résistance is that last night out under the stars. But as I mentioned, there are about 50 spots left for that. And we just recently announced that this is unfortunate. I was hoping we could get more people on that site, but the reality is it's going to be capped at about 450 people out there. And we're bumping up against that limit right now. We're at about almost 400. So I would encourage people to do that. And it's going to be exciting because what I'm hoping we can do, I'm going to ask some of our, big influencers who have, 100 million followers and whatnot that are supporters of CE5 contact to also put the link out so we can have a mass contact meditation that night. So however many people are out under the stars, there could be, 100 times that number, 1,000 times that number live meditating around the world doing it, which, as everyone knows from seeing Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which, by the way, is up on Amazon Prime and everywhere still, that has this huge effect in consciousness where people all over the world who don't even know you're doing this meditation are affected in the deepest part of the structure of higher consciousness that everyone is tied into, because the total number of minds in the universe is one. It's a singularity. And so when there are that many people doing something with this intention, it not only affects the cosmos and facilitates peaceful open contact with these interstellar civilizations and ETs, but it affects the planet. I mean, the baseline level of where all of space, time, matter, and people are fluxing in and out of this field of consciousness, the pure conscious field. So that's why doing this together is so important. I'm hoping we can do, maybe 2 or 3 of these each year. The other important thing is that right after that, sort of 2 days later, on April 12th until the 18th, for 6 nights after this 3-day conference, we found a location. It's only about 15, 20 minutes from the hotel where we're doing the weekend. We're going to do an entire week-long expedition. Now, that's only going to be limited to about 25, 30 people. And for people to come to that, we want people to have either come to a previous week-long event or this conference or a previous 3-day conference. Because we want to be sure that people coming to that are very experienced, because it's a small group, but I want to train eventually. Those are going to feed into a program where we're going to set up people who are formal instructors of CE5 contact, something I've never done that I know I need to do. And that's something I want to build that base for that. So these week-long events are now going to be people who are very experienced. So everyone will have been on a prior week-long event, or at least these 3-day intensives. And that's going to make for a much higher quality experience for a whole week in a small group out under the stars. And we'll be out in the desert every night, all 6 nights. So that'll begin Tuesday night, the 12th, and go all the way through the 18th.
Yeah, those are very powerful. As you know, uh, lots of stuff happens on those. I mean, tons.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And we're going to be in a remote site that we've gotten clearance to in a park that is no one will have access to it except our group. So it's very interesting. And then during the day, we're going to be meeting in this huge remote house adjacent to this park, where we'll have afternoon sessions with the 25, 30 people who are there. So it's going to be really exciting for those who can stay on after the conference. So we just have yesterday figured out all the logistics on that and got them all nailed down. So that's why I'm announcing that. The registration for that has not gone out. This is sort of a preliminary announcement. This is coming, but people may want to mark that. And it's over that through that Easter weekend. This week-long event starts on Tuesday and goes all the way through to that Easter weekend. And the 3-day conference, the 8th, 9th, and 10th, is the weekend before Easter. So I hope everyone who can make it there will. And if you can't be there in person, join us virtually. That's how we build this morphogenic field effect, as Rupert Sheldrake talks about, where enough people begin to do something, it shifts everyone in a positive direction. And boy, do we need this planet to start shifting in a positive direction.
Yes, we do. Yeah, those things, when you get a lot of people like that in consciousness, in these moving into these higher states of consciousness, it literally affects their consciousness for a long time.
And people's lives are changed.
Absolutely.
And what you find is that people who do this with a group of people, and they've done these in studies with meditators, that if there's one person meditating, it has a certain effect for themselves and perhaps the environment and say the field of consciousness. But when you have dozens of people, or in the case of this conference for this weekend, hundreds of people doing it, it has an enormous effect. And this is, back in the day was called the 𝗦𝘁𝗶𝗵 effect, but where they found that if you sent a certain number, it was 1% of the population of a town in as people who understood meditation, higher states of consciousness, and they went in and meditated, that crime rates went down, ER visits go down, coherence goes up. And this is when the rest of the community has no idea that those people are in their town. So there is a well-documented effect on social behavior in a positive way. And this is sort of the power of meditation, prayer states, higher states of consciousness. Been very well documented in healing studies also, by the way, that Dr. Larry 𝗏𝗏 documented in Recovering the Soul, a book about this sort of effect of consciousness and meditative and prayer states on healing. But in our case, we're doing this to heal the planet and the body of humanity, let's say, in developing a future where we become interstellar citizens and ambassadors to the universe. The whole CE5 contact program is called Ambassadors to the Universe, where people, empower themselves. And that's what this weekend and the subsequent weeks about. People empowering themselves to not just be passive conference junkies, because that's just tedious, but actually learn the skills and the knowledge needed to be a citizen ambassador from Earth to these other civilizations that are waiting for that. I mean, I always tell people that they've been knocking on our front door, back door, side door for decades now, since the atomic bombs first went off, wanting to get an appropriate, peaceful response from humans. And they have not gotten that. Not even to this day. And the CE5 Contact Initiative, when I founded it in 1990, with the purpose of it was this concept of the everyday man on the street, woman on the street, becoming a liaison from humanity to these extraterrestrial civilizations, because the governments of the world have badly dropped the ball on this. And it's been, unfortunately, because of secrecy, been relegated to illegal covert programs that have made a complete mess of it. So this is where the responsibility for we the people steps in, not just for our own planet, our own country, but more importantly for the future of humanity and its relationship with these other interstellar civilizations. And that time has really come where we can potentiate this. The technologies we have now with the internet and various social media platforms and the ability to webinar events gives us the ability to really expand the reach and organizational abilities of a CE5 initiative. And the contact that's happening, I think, all over the world that I'm hearing about from team members is actually going up a lot because I think there is this quickening, let's call it, this awakening and deeper consciousness and knowledge is potentiating it. So that's really why we want to have these in-depth conferences and then followed on by these week-long expeditions for people who've been to those and to previous week-long events. And eventually, I hope we can begin to develop a program where people, on a long training period, become instructors of CE5 contact. Now, what everyone can do is get the app. I mean, if you're doing this, whether you're coming in person or privately, come to these experiences already trying out how to do it through the CE5 Contact app. And I think it's very important for people. We have hundreds of thousands of people around the world doing this, millions actually. But the app teaches you how to do the meditation, the remote viewing, how to set up your team. If you really go through the app and it thoroughly, it is a complete instruction course. But it's an app. It's not doing it in person with other people, which is why we want to do this with a larger conference, so people actually experience it live. I think it's much more powerful when people gather together and do it. But to prepare to do it on your own, get the app. People have amazing contact experiences just using the app. We're hearing every day from people who've had just astonishing experiences.
Yeah, that structure of the universe meditation that's on that app. I mean, people write in all the time and mention this continuously. It's what a powerful meditation that is. It's a guided meditation, and it's just amazing. Plus, we have all the tones. All your tones are on there.
Everything you need is in there. You just need a couple pieces of equipment and go out, and you can play it. You can Bluetooth it to a portable speaker and form a team. It's very powerful, and the more that people do it, the more it signals, let's say, it conveys to the ETs that are watching this planet with increasing concern as we increasingly weaponize space, that there are people on the planet who are enlightened, are awake, are peaceful, are not filled with superstitious ideas about this issue, and are willing to put themselves out there to make contact. They're wanting us to do this because who else is doing it? State Department isn't. The United Nations isn't, although we've recommended that they do so. I don't know of any leader around the world that has a team set up making any kind of intelligent approach, and or any parliament or Congress. So in the absence of that, my friends, guess what? It's you and me. People say, who's going to do this? I say, go look in the mirror. You look in the mirror. You want to see who's responsible? It's each and every one of us. And I think that's where, for a lot of people, they go, whoa, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I say, well, we need to be ready because time is of the essence.
Really, it's actually, to be ready for this, you just need to be conscious and be in a pure heart filled, feeling. It's
Right.
very simple. It's not difficult. People always think that this is very complex.
Right. Well, this is why I loved it when Dr. Targ is setting Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. He says, yeah, everyone's mystified this, but it goes back to ancient, the earliest recorded history of humanity, that by virtue of being a conscious, awake, sentient being, every single human can do this. We've sort of made it the domain of the mystics and the gurus or the priesthood or what have you. And I think that's just, frankly, an abuse of power by people who want to aggrandize themselves, frankly. And I've always said no. I mean, if you're a human being or an ET, you're conscious and you can be aware of that conscious field, which is what the meditative techniques facilitate experiencing. From there, you can see any place, be anywhere, know any discrete thing. We'll get into this during this conference in the ancient Vedic concept of 𝗷𝗏 𝗦, it's called. This level of consciousness that's very encoded in the consciousness field where all knowledge, all events, all specific needed information is located. It's like the ultimate cosmic supercomputer or AI, but it's that field of consciousness. But there is a level of it that you can tap into. And a study just came out that said that 15 seconds in what's psychologists call the hypnagogic state, where you're like, when you're going into sleep and you're just in that state between awake and sleep, that 15 seconds in there vastly increases people's creative abilities and et cetera and so on. Now, all the remote viewing experts know that in that state is when the best images and remote viewing, and I've said this for years, you're going deep and you're not so focused like we are now in the normal waking conscious state, but you're not also in the darkness of sleep. It's that in between deep state. Now, the meditative state can take you there and just keep you there. But this study found that 15 seconds of experiencing that hypnagogic state has this enormous increase in the individual mind's capacity for creative thinking, problem solving, all kinds of virtues. It's an amazing study that just came out in the last couple of weeks. So I think this is, the more we understand the science of consciousness and its benefits, the more we're going to be able to transform the planet, because I think that the root of the problem is really deeply based in true spiritual crisis, not religious, and in the understanding of deep consciousness, higher states of consciousness, and deep spirituality, what I call original spirituality. It's universal as opposed to the trappings of organized religions and traditions, but which have their place. But I think that if we begin to look at this in a more universal way, the universality of mind and consciousness and heart and being sentient and awake, and then begin to realize that those states of meditative states, and even when you're going to sleep at night, or beginning to enter into a lucid dream, that there are amazing capabilities that are in that subtle, very quiet aspect of mind where entire dimensions and the universe can open up to you, and knowledge. It's the wellspring, by the way, of all science and arts also. That level of consciousness is the point of inspiration, where people figure out, have inspiration, where inventions are discovered, where art and beauty, all of that is in that aspect of consciousness. We're going to talk about this on this long weekend together out in Arizona in April.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before. When people are working on their consciousness and raising their consciousness, it alters completely how they relate to other people, which is what is so desperately needed on this planet, for sure.
Yeah, the people, animals. I mean, in the experiences I've had, when you're in that state, even wild animals come up around you and just meditate with you. I mean, I love this story. Once we were up in England on Woodborough Hill in Alton Barnes, and we were meditating, setting up to do the Sanskrit puja, this ceremony that I do when I'm teaching the meditation. And by the way, we're going to do that every night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. And we were doing this out in the middle of this, field, and there were all these giant cattle. We had to watch where you stepped, but we found a place to make our circle and do this. And we're setting up to do the puja, and we sit down, and the cows of this whole herd, some with the horns, everything, come over, and they all bow, they all kneel down, and lay down around us. And the entire time we're doing the Sanskrit ceremony and the meditation, and also the contact protocol and remote viewing, they're literally there meditating with us. And as soon as that's over and we start talking again, they get up and wander off and start munching the grass. Now, we've had this happen quite a few times. It's really beautiful to see how nature and animals respond to humans in this state of peaceful higher consciousness.
We've had that happen on a ranch in Texas.
Yes, yeah, it's beautiful.
I kept hearing this breathing and moving, and I said, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" And we were thinking, "Wow, what could it be?" And we literally turned around and shined a light on it. And here are all these cows standing there just watching. It was really, they were like, I don't know, 8 feet away. It was really amazing. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. The other big breaking news, and this is a big pivot away from what we we're just saying. It's the other end of the spectrum of what we're working on. Of course, everyone knows since that _𝗖𝗘𝗍 came out about 4 years ago, there's been this huge juggernaut. That film had over 740 million people see it. It's still one of the top viewed films on sites like Amazon Prime and Hulu and Tubi and what have you. When the community moved to create, unfortunately, a counter narrative for disclosure that had to do with it being a national security threat, et cetera, and so on. And, of course, people have heard me talk about that. The good news is that this message that the UFOs are real, that they're not fictitious, it's been confirmed by the Pentagon, what have you, even though that has happened within the context of it being spun by the spinmeisters out there as a national security threat. I mean, every article in New York Times, CNN, Fox, every media around the world, the Sunday Times of London, have always included that as the narrative. We don't know what they are. That's a big lie. Go see The Cosmic Hoax. It's up there everywhere for free to see. The documentary we released in July. And they're not ours, another big lie, and they're a threat to the national security. So unfortunately, this is the information that the members of Congress that we've been reaching out to are getting. Because the foxes guarding the hen house from these unacknowledged special access projects, these secret projects, have their acolytes and their minions in the staffers' offices, in the SCIF, the Secure Communication Information Facility, where they get briefed. The senators and congressmen get information on this. And every single, and this is without exception, because I know who they are, every single person in there who are briefing the members of Congress, and the president for that matter, are either misinformed or deliberately disinforming intentionally the members of Congress. Now, this is an issue because in the last few months, there are senators and congressmen calling for a permanent office in the Congress to study this. The Pentagon has just announced ahead of that they're opening up an office to study what is now called the new fake term of the month of UAPs. That's replacing UFOs, that replaced flying saucers, is what they were used to be called back in the 50s and 60s. So I think that because of that, there is a huge momentum of people. We've now identified about 15 members of the Senate and House who are actively interested in this, but we've got to be able to reach them on a sustained level. Mm-hmm. Now, back when we did this, a little bit of history for everyone. In the 90s, we were working the system sort of behind the scenes, and everyone knows this story. Project Starlight, the predecessor to Disclosure Project, as an emergency doctor, I was shuttling up to DC and other places to brief members of Congress, the president's people, the CI director, what have you. And our hope then was that those people, having been deeply briefed on the issue, would do the right thing. They wouldn't. They were scared to touch this. They were threatened, warned off, waved off. Now that these covert programs have pulled the trigger and said, oh, it's okay to study of this, and everyone can talk about it. We're going to normalize it through the media because the big mainstream media take their marching orders from these operatives. That's absolutely true. Then, but you have to talk about it in these certain way, a certain sort of spin. It's a threat. What's the threat to the national security? We don't know what they are. We're going to call them some made-up name, unexplained aerial phenomenon. Rubbish. They're not unexplained. They're not just aerial, and it's not a phenomenon. A phenomenon is a bolide or ball lightning or something. And the other is it's this threat to the national security. The three big lies that we outline in the Cosmic Hoax, our documentary. Now, what I found is that persistent talking point isn't going away. It's getting deepened in the last month or two. Mm-hmm. Senator Gillibrand of New York has called for an office being formed, or others on the other side of the aisle. Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican, he was being mentored by the late Senator Harry Reid, who just passed away in the last couple of weeks from Nevada. And I think that what I've observed from being on the inside of this and having a place in DC is that in order to get the access persistently, we're going to have to do something different. Now, in 2001, when we did the National Press Club event, I tell this story with trepidation. Somebody who I knew very well came up to me at the conference we held the next day after the press conference. And he said, how much money can you give these members of Congress and senators? I said, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? He says, you have to have influence, and you have to provide money to their campaigns, and you have to set up events for them. I said, well, we're not set up to do that. This is a nonprofit, and we're just. He says, they're not going to listen. Now, I thought that was a terribly ugly and cynical comment. And it was, but it also happens to be terribly true. So today, we have filed an organized disclosure PAC, Political Action Committee, nonpartisan. We're going to organize to support people who are supporting real disclosure and not alien invasion disclosure. We're going to set up events where they can be educated and supported, and that is being formed. I've never done this. We're going to see how it applies. We have a very substantial group in Washington who will be facilitating the logistics of this. So you will be hearing about this in the coming days, but this is going to be a permanent fixture in Washington. And it's called Disclosure PAC, PAC, Political Action Committee. Now, not at all partisan. Doesn't matter if you're left, right, center, independent, libertarian, a socialist. It doesn't matter, because what we're finding is, and I said this back in 1992, 93, 94, when we got involved with the Clinton White House and what have you. This issue transcends all lines politically. It should never be partisan. And luckily, the senators and congressmen working the issue currently, even though they're being misinformed, have said the same thing. This is not a left right. This goes way over or transcends the normal fracture lines, left, right, what have you. So that's how this is going to be conducted. It will absolutely never be partisan. So those of you who are partisan in your views on things, sorry to tell you, this is going to be completely nonpartisan, not bipartisan, nonpartisan. But the purpose of it is to formalize a long-term educational effort to not only educate, but also encourage through support those members of the Senate, Congress, or a candidate who really wants to do proper disclosure, which involves a true disclosure that doesn't put us into a conflict-oriented path with these visitors. Number two, discloses the technologies that are being kept secret and are being told to these members of Congress that they're unexplained, when we have people from Lockheed, from other aerospace companies that can go in with me and show them where the man-made UFOs are being built, which, by the way, no member of the Senate or House is briefed on that. So we need to have a presence there, getting ahead of this tidal wave of spin that has captured the disclosure movement in Washington and in the mainstream media. And we need to do it now. I mean, we're running out of time to do it. So that's what that's about. I'm in Washington almost every week, but we need to have a structure around us to legally do this. So that's what we're forming. So that is a very big announcement. It's probably the biggest announcement on this issue in history, certainly more than the Disclosure Project of 2001. So that's something we have to do quickly. And you will be hearing, those of you listening, sign up for we have a free newsletter at 𝗖𝗘𝟱 and you'll get information that'll be coming out from us about this activity and how you can support it and help. You may know members of the Congress and want to have an event for them that the Disclosure PAC can fund, host, and then educate these members of the Congress on. Or it may be a governor. It may not even be someone in the U.S. Congress. It could be a governor. The other objective of the Disclosure PAC, Political Action Committee, is to also see that the resources of the government that are being wasted on energy and alternative energy research, some of that gets put into the funding and support for open source 0-point energy so that we can get off of the fossil fuels, but also, frankly, windmills and solar and everything. I'm looking at one of the biggest solar farms in Virginia that's in my meadow, which unfortunately collapsed, and our 𝗧𝗏𝗂𝗧 we had, a foot of heavy snow collapsed it, and we put it back up. But those are very fickle systems, very low energy output, very expensive, not practical to run 8 billion people. It's too little, too late. If we had 200 years or even 50 years, we do not. The bios, as a civilization, we can't. So that's another big objective of the Disclosure PAC. And the third is to encourage a diplomatic governmental initiative to make contact, CE5 contact, but in a peaceful way, non-militarized, and also to educate these leaders on the essential need to keep all weapons out of space, and the ones that are up there need to be deactivated, because this is a huge looming problem, not only geopolitically around the world, because once everyone starts putting weapons up there targeting each other, it's Star Wars, right? But covertly, we know that these weaponized systems that are up there, satellites and what have you, have been targeting, and more often than we should ever have done, destroying extraterrestrial vehicles. Very dangerous business. So that's something that I know members of Congress do not know, or even at the United Nations. I remember when I was briefing the UN Secretary General and his wife up in the 90s, they turned white. They said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "No, this is going on. It's very covert, it's very unacknowledged, and it's extremely dangerous." So these are things that need to be talked about seriously. What they're really wanting to do, what the media, which are just sort of front operators for the intelligence community that's doing this false disclosure of, we don't know what they are, we don't have anything that flies this way, they're a threat to our national security. That's the three mantras they keep reporting. The problem is that means that our leaders are being completely gaslit and put in the wrong direction, because enough of them were learning about what we're doing. They did it after the Disclosure Project news conference in 2001, and then they ramped it up again after the unacknowledged documentary went absolutely viral globally. So this is a big problem, and I think that if we're going to influence the outcome in a positive way, we're going to have to do, I hate to say it, we're going to have to play the game that everyone plays in Washington, which I think is you almost have to put your soul through a car wash and even thinking about this. However, living in the real world, we have to do the world we live in, not the world of our dreams. We can create the world of our dreams, but right now we have to live with the exigencies and the realities of the current order, which is utterly corrupt. And access in Washington is too often by who has the influence, who can provide the funding, who can actually do. So that's why this is why there are thousands of political action committees. This was one, however, that's a very philanthropic one that'll be about disclosure, peace in space, peace with our neighbors in space, and the bringing forth of these illegally suppressed technologies that would save the biosphere and eliminate poverty in 15 to 20 years. So that's our objective with this. So that's a big announcement today. And then there's one more big one.
Yep, which actually, if you can get all these guys together and they want to learn how to do CE5 and you want to do this, this would be the perfect place to do it.
Yes, it would be. So we have just acquired a piece of land in Virginia, near Hot Springs, Virginia, where Thomas Jefferson would go to those hot springs there, and they're ancient Native American pools, actually. And it's where the Omni Homestead is. It's this incredible area. And it's about an hour and a half from my country house here near the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. But it's only about 3 hours from Washington. But it's in this enormous wilderness area. So we got 683 acres that we just closed on a couple weeks ago, just before New Year's. And we're wanting to build a CE5 contact research and retreat center where people from all over the world would come there, because the 683 acres, you visualize this, is surrounded by 1.8 million acres of national forest, permanently protected national forest.
Perfect.
And it's only about 10 minutes from the land to the Omni Homestead, which, if you look that up, is an amazing resort, and about 3 minutes from the Thomas Jefferson hot springs and pools that are right there. And about 10 minutes from there, there's a 2,500 acre lake that is really all in the national forest. It's amazingly beautiful. So we're wanting to build, now, of course, anybody out there have a large construction company that can start on this spring or summer, let me know. But we want to build a retreat center, a modest, not that large, maybe, 18 to 20 bedrooms, where we can have trainings, where we can have retreats, where we can have educational experience, and where CE5 teams can also come and experience that on a very private, large tract of land surrounded by pristine nature and stars. Well, when it's clear. I mean, on the East Coast, there aren't as many clear and sunny days as there are in the desert, but still, it's an amazingly beautiful spot. And we have already the plans for what we want to do there. But I'm just announcing this because it's an exciting sort of next step in CE5 contact training for their teams. And I hope also where we can have a formal teacher training program there, where people become really trained to do this. So that's something we're going to start on. I was wanting to get out there in the last month or so to see where we could actually clear some of the land. It's 100% densely forested. You can visualize 683 acres surrounded by almost 2 million acres of nothing but forest. I mean, literally nothing but, I mean, you can't even see where you're going. It's this dense forest. So it's between 2,200 feet and 3,000 feet above sea level. It gets rather chilly there. If anyone knows how to do this, give me a call. I'm wanting to create a translucent bubble, a sphere, that when it's rainy or if it's cold, we could be in this sphere, but still be outside doing CE5 contact and be relatively warm and protected. So it's something I'd like to construct as part of the contact site. So in inclement weather, or even when it's cold, we could be in there. And there's
like a sports venue, you mean, where they have this thing that comes over the top?
Yeah. Yeah. But translucent.
Translucent.
Yeah. Like a bubble, like a dome, like a translucently perfectly clear dome you could sit in. So I have the designs for that. I don't know how to build one, but somebody might. So I'm putting this out there to a lot of people just to say, if you know a large, medium to large construction firm that can come in, I know it's very hard to get anything built right now because of the supply chain and labor shortage. But if somebody has such an entity, of course, they'd have to relocate for about a year to build this facility up in this remote area. But by the way, the entire county is more than 50% national forest and only has 4,400 people. So it's rural, to say the least, mostly wilderness. But that's the perfect place to do this. And yet, you can fly into any number of airports and be there within an hour or 45 minutes or even 3 hours from Washington. So I think that it'll be a really great place to do this. I've always wanted to eventually have a place where we can train people, but also gather as a CE5 community and have this experience where it's dedicated. We've always used rental houses and Airbnbs or been on public lands where people can invade the site and disrupt what we're doing. This would be a protected, dedicated place, which would correct all those security problems, but also it would create the energy, this energy field. It's like what they talk about with the sacred places, where you can go to a place and feel the experiences that have happened there that are very enlightened and positive. Or if something terrible has happened, you can feel that too. It's embedded in the Akashic record, the fabric, what the naval intelligence people call the white noise of space-time. So but you can create this amazing energy on a site where this is being done as the purpose of the land. And I also, when we start finding where we want to clear the spots for this, I'm hoping we can do go there and do a blessing of the land, because I know this is native. This part, I'm part Cherokee, 5/16, a little over a quarter Native American. And this area, that area was very much a sacred area for Native people, because you had the hot springs and the warm springs there where they could gather, which of course tribal peoples would always gather where there's not only water but also warm water, particularly in a cold climate. So it's a really amazing area, but it also has this interesting history with the founders of the United States going there. Wow. Back in the day. So it's an interesting, let's call it Akashic record history in this area that we just sort of stumbled across. So it's very exciting. I hope if there's anyone listening who actually has knows someone who could put in a serious construction operation there. We're not going to want to do this over 10 years. We want to do it in 12 months. And it can be done. I mean, if you were to build like 4 houses, let's say, in a small development of 4 properties, developers go in and do that in a year all the time. We need someone who can come in there and do that.
Right. And it's really, all these intersecting lines are just amazing, really.
Mm-hmm. The energy and it's enough land that eventually there could be prototypes of these new energy devices there. Right. There could be a skiff there if we needed to. It's an area where you could have all kinds of meetings. With 683 acres, we could probably get enough of it cleared, because it's facing west and south, where you could also have a big solar array until we get a free energy device that would also be able to run a lot of the needs there. So that we're looking at this in a very comprehensive way from the point of view of the energy of it, consciousness of it, the ecology, the deep spiritual ecology, and what have you.
Right. Could this be a place where you could build a lab to work on the ZPE, or no?
You could have a satellite lab there, yes. But I mean, one of the problems with something that remote is that nobody wants to live there full time. I mean, most people went, well, I mean, everyone wants to go to their Starbucks or their Nordstrom, or they want to go shopping to a grocery store or Whole Foods. I mean, this whole county only has 4,400 people. And if you, I don't even know, you probably have to drive an hour or 2 hours to find a Whole Foods or find a, so I think a lot of people would find it, uh, how do you say, kind of reclusive to be living there all the time. I mean, out where we live here, we're about 20 minutes from the University of Virginia, and people laugh about being out here. When we moved here, our neighbor said, "Dare we use the R word?" I said, "What's the R word?" Recluse, because everyone out here are these eccentric recluses who are hiding, and so it's really funny. It's a joke in the family with our kids, but this looks like a metropolitan area here compared to that. I mean, that's, we're talking really mostly wilderness.
Oh,
And
what
the
a
res- and the Homestead Resort. Now, if you look up on the internet, the Omni Homestead Resort, interestingly, they're about to put, I think, $130 million
that, yeah.
into improving that area. So there'll be infrastructure there. But honestly, I think most people would find living in a community of that size and population and amenities difficult. So you could certainly have a secure facility there on that much land, surrounded by that much national forest, for part of the operation for an energy lab. But I don't think the main operation could be there. I think a
That
satellite
Omni was,
facility could be.
when I looked that up and looked up the Omni, which I hadn't, I didn't know that was there. That is an absolutely beautiful old resort. I mean, I can see where they're putting millions of dollars into this thing to upgrade it, but what an absolutely beautiful property that is. Really.
It is beautiful. And of course, this land is kind of mountainous, and we're gonna have to figure out where you could put these, but also where we want our contact sites. So I'm hoping, ever since we got the closed on the property, it's been either a foot of snow and another foot of snow, or 5 degrees below zero, or we just had the most insane last 3 weeks of weather, 4 weeks. But I'm hoping soon I'll be able to get out there to figure out where we can do it. When I first saw the land, it was in October and all the leaves were out. So you couldn't see, there was maybe one spot where I could kind of see out. But to get a sense of the land, when if you don't live on the East Coast, you don't realize how dense the forests are here, these deciduous forests.
Right.
And almost all this land are deciduous forests and giant rhododendron and mountain laurel and stuff like that. So it's not a jungle, but it's probably more like a jungle than you would think.
Right, but you're good at going into that and sensing the energy. I remember when we were in Tucson, I mean, you were like, "Yeah, turn there on that road," and we were like, "What? That road? Yeah, down there is perfect." And we were like, nobody even knew that site was even there. I mean, it was amazing. I'm like, how do you think he knew that? It's just amazing. So, yeah, I think this sounds like the perfect place to do CE5.
Oh, it'd be amazing. Yeah. It'd just be amazing. So that's an exciting development in the last couple of weeks. So I wanted to do this show to give people an idea of kind of what we're doing, what we're planning to do, and sort of the other project. If I survive, Mission Impossible. Should you accept this? Is that we really want to do a feature film this year on what I call the lost century. So we need people to kind of begin to think how they can help with that. Now, what is that about? The lost century is what the term I used and sort of coined for the idea that for the last 100 years, we have had technologies from the time of Tesla. I mean, not the company, but the real Nikola Tesla. From his era to now, there have been thousands of devices, thousands of electromagnetic generators and motors that would have gotten us off oil, gas, coal, nuclear, ended poverty in the world, created justice for all the peoples of the world, and completely transformed human civilization. The fascist industrialists then and now have ruthlessly kept that secret. Now, what this next feature film documentary we want to do is pulling the curtain back just on that. All the technologies, not just the flying things that Lockheed Skunk Works has, but the technologies that would run your house, your car, without having 900 pounds of lithium ion batteries to plug in and charge. By the way, you know, when you plug in your electric car, where are you getting the energy from? A coal-fired and gas-fired, mostly fossil fuel power grid. It's not like it's coming out of the ether. So, and it's become such a big problem that there are shortages of electricity they're projecting with everyone plugging in their cars. Well, Tesla correctly called this 0 point or quantum vacuum field of energy the infinite energy field, because it's infinite. You don't exhaust it. To run all the energy needs of the United States has been likened to, by scientists, of taking a thimble of water out of the Great Lakes. That's the density of energy. Now, there are national security implications if this is used in a weapon system, if it's used in a missile system, et cetera, and so on. So there are concerns, but if we don't get this resolved, we're never going to fix the environmental problem, the global poverty problem. And so this next feature film documentary is going to be a laser focus on that for a 2-hour film that's going to show all the evidence and the proof and the science, but also the vision. We need some really good CGI and motion graphics people, because I really want to show people, what does the world look like in 2030, 2050, 2100, 2500, when society has met all of its material needs. And at that point, you have a sustainable level 1 civilization, meaning that we're not fighting over land resources or what have you. We're peaceful, we're sustainable, truly sustainable, and there's no poverty on the planet. At that point, humanity begins to turn towards pursuits of higher states of consciousness, creative pursuits. It's a total change. It's not just about the material science. It's a spiritual, social, and physical transformation of the earth and humanity. And that is how important these technologies are. I do think that in order to get us to the point where people are actually going to support a massive retooling of the industrial infrastructure, never mind the research and development of these technologies, which are non-trivial. I mean, it's a serious engineering thing to do it. We have to educate 1 billion people about it. You know, if we reach 750 million people with knowledge, we need to reach 1 or 2 billion people with this, because we are in an emergency on this planet. It's deepening every day. And so that's something we want to put into production and hopefully complete in 2022. So now that we're in January 2022, this is sort of what we're wanting to give people an idea of what we'll be doing. We're going to need help on a lot of fronts, obviously. Keep in mind, we don't have a paid staff or office. So, you know, this is how, you know, kind of real evolutions happen.
Yeah, I love that idea about the CGI too, Steve, because we've talked about this. People have no ability to see that kind of world. They just don't, right? And so when you talk about all these wonderful, wonderful things that could change their lives, they have no point of reference for what that would look like. So they're like, oh, you know, I'm fine. I'm fine here. But if they see what that world looks like, then we have a chance.
Well, we also have to show not only the obvious first order changes. What do I mean by that? You're running your house on a free energy device, quote unquote. The energy is coming from the fabric of space-time, a 0 point quantum vacuum. You have no power bill, you have no oil bill, you have no gas bill, and you have no pollution associated with it. That's obvious. What's not obvious? Most of the deforestation in the world and the rainforest all over the world, those are disappearing because of poverty, by people cutting down trees to make charcoal or wood to cook their food. That's half the population of the world, by the way, is
Right.
is living like that. Half, almost. I think it's something like 3 billion people out of the 7.5 or 8 are living on a subsistence level. So the second order is that all that stops
Right.
because every little village and community can have one of these devices for a fraction of the aid being provided by governments now to impoverished areas that would give them refrigeration, clean water, agriculture, irrigation, power, etc. Don't have to chop down the rainforest. Here's another implication: food. Well, if you have energy that's non-polluting and at no cost, you can grow oranges at the South Pole in a dome that is kept at a temperature and humidity because the energy system needed to do that is free and non-polluting,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's like in the Bible when it says, even the desert shall bloom. Water, water in the atmosphere. If you have, I know people who have at their homes these condenser systems where they take the humidity and create tap water,
Absolutely.
but they use a lot of electricity.
Oh
And the
yeah.
electricity pollutes, and the electricity is expensive. What happens when energy becomes free of cost? It's coming from a non-polluting source. Think about it. Our entire civilization transforms. But see, we need to show that to people so
Right.
that the people who are wanting us to spend trillions of dollars on solutions that won't get us there understand, let's take 0.0001% of that and put it into an open source public interest research and development effort that's live stream blockchain protected, that gets out to the public with these technologies, with the magic formula, the circuitry, the plans, the schematics, all of it. And that has to happen by there being a groundswell of the public understanding it's possible. Just like disclosure couldn't happen until we did a certain level of education, so people realized that this is real and wasn't just some fictitious subject for science fiction advocates. And I think that's what we want to achieve with the lost century, because we need to actually step up that. And that would dovetail very well, by the way, with disclosure pack,
Right.
compassion committee, because doing those two things together would create this juggernaut of change. So that's one of the synergistic strategies we're putting together this year.
Yeah, I think if people understand what that is and how that works and they can see it, I think they would want it.
Well, as the ET told Colonel Corso, it's a new world if you can take it.
Right.
I
And
suggest that we take it.
I
It's
would
time that we take it and create it. It's all sitting there. The information, the knowledge, everything is sitting there. But the people have to organize to make it happen. Uh,
right.
we can't wait for the government. We need to educate them so they don't. One of the chief purposes of Disclosure Pact is so that the leaders of this country, the most powerful military and economic country in the world, are not diverted onto the war path, which is where they're headed right now. But we have to buy some time there, because that happens, it's the end of the world as we know it, quite frankly. Where these sociopaths are dragging, misinforming members of Congress and the president on this stuff is very, very dangerous. It's the most dangerous thing happening, and no one's talking about it. So we have to intervene. We need an intervention there. But we also need to put together these technologies and the educational foundation for people to get their minds around the fact that energy is embedded in the fabric of space-time matter at a level that has been stumbled upon and discovered all the way back to the late 1800s, but certainly by the 19 teens, 20s, 30s with people like Nikola Tesla and others. And so people forget that in the late 1920s, uh, T. Townsend Brown and the German scientists were doing high voltage systems with things levitating.
Right.
Levitation, anti-gravity. Those were in the physics journals in the late 20s. So we're going to show all this very hardcore, mainstream scientific proof, but then we're going to pivot to how do we make this happen? Because the headwinds here are the 800, 900 trillion dollars in financial instruments, special interests, oil, gas, coal, nuclear, and even solar and wind, what have you.
Yeah,
So,
these technologies definitely need to be for the betterment of mankind rather than being constantly weaponized.
yeah, the only place they're operational are in classified programs and used for very bad purposes. So I tell people it's the worst of all worlds in a sense right now, because the worst applications of these technologies, because they've been sequestered and used in unacknowledged special access projects that are not overseen by the president or the Congress or anyone else, or they're very dangerous how they're being deployed. Whereas the beneficial applications that would save the biosphere, eliminate poverty, et cetera, and create a just and peaceful planet are being withheld. So it is literally the worst of all situations. And by the way, my friend, the extraterrestrial civilizations are watching every bit of this. They certainly know this if I do. And so keep in mind that this is all part and parcel. I always tell people this symbol right here is the top one is CE5 contact, higher consciousness, universal peace. The other one is disclosure and the truth coming out in a way that the public understands it.
Right.
And then the other is the technology, the free energy technology that would give us a new physical civilization, but with it, a new social just civilization that can create the foundation for enlightenment and an enlightened civilization. That's what this is. And so that's what we're working on.
Yeah. And any of these people who think that they're doing this stuff occultly, right, hidden,
Yeah,
they are not. They are being watched. You cannot hide anything in consciousness.
nope, absolutely not. Which is another thing. Those of you listening, if you know someone who has one of these devices sitting in their garage or in their laboratory, I've seen a few of them. Network them to us if they're not snake oil salesmen. I mean, honestly, 90+% of all leads we've had on this have been fraudulent enterprises or mismeasurements of the power dynamics of the system, because people were amateurs. And once we got it drilled down on it, we found it wasn't doing what they thought it was. But if someone actually has a legitimate system, the time of sitting on your hands on this is well nigh over. And we do have a team of people now who could support, if we could put in front of the people in our network now, we could get the financial and the other support to move it out and disclose it very quickly. But it'd have to be disclosed open source. And that's something someone would need to cooperate with. And but that doesn't mean that they couldn't be compensated. They can, but it has to be open source. You cannot go through a patent, and you can't keep the technology secret. And if you don't have 500 million to 1 billion people know about it, when it's operational very quickly, it or you will disappear. So there is a strategy for doing this. It's very well thought through. We've tried everything else over the last 30 years. The other conventional methods of bringing this technology to the public have failed, and the people, most of them, have vanished with those failed strategies. So there is a strategy for doing this, but it cannot be secretive. It cannot be intellectual property. It can't be a secret sauce. It's got to be open source, like GitHub or some of these open source software. But in this case, the whole operating system or the energy device. And that's something they can do.
Didn't you say that those that want to make money out of it on the secondary level, they can?
Oh yeah, phase 2. Once the whole world knows this is true, and every physicist and university are, building up iterations of that. Sure, I mean there'd be what we need. I mean, to all the greedy, I call them the dumb greedy people. I mean, it's really stupid. They think it's like my precious, what is that? Gollum, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
My precious, wait a minute. You got 8 billion people. You have over 1 billion motor vehicles spewing stuff. You have all these people with electricity in their houses. If you had 1,000 companies the size of Apple or Amazon, it's hardly enough. So I don't know why people get into this zero-sum game thinking. We're talking about 8 billion people needing yesterday, like 50 or 100 years ago, these technologies. To stand up that level of financial, industrial, manufacturing, distribution, you don't need to be a Rockefeller of new energy to do this. You don't want to do it as one entity. But there would be, I mean, in people who worry about money on this, the trillions that are being spent and wasted on nonsense, it's it's really sad. They're thinking too small, way too small. So I think that the truth is, it has to be put out in a way that the cradle of its birth isn't blown to smithereens, and that's why it needs to be quickly all over the net, blockchain protected, and open source. No patent, no intellectual property. And frankly, anyone listening, that's the only basis upon which I will cooperate with someone. Because every other person I've tried to do this with, they've either been threatened or many of them are dead. So, if you know it's not going to work, why do it? You should only do what's going to work.
Right.
Well, good. Well, it's been a bit over an hour, about an hour and 11 minutes. I went a little over an hour. I wanted to do an hour, but I think we covered a lot.
We did.
Yeah. And
thank you.
Pat, thanks for everything. You're an angel. And I hope to see everyone either online or with us out in the desert in April. It'll be a great fun. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll have a great time.
Thank you, Greer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.